Good evening, everyone. I'm Monty Murray. I'm president of the South Wake Conservationist, which is the chapter in South Wake County of the North Carolina Wildlife Federation. And I'm very pleased about our speaker tonight is C.C. King from the North Carolina Wildlife Federation, good friend, and somebody who is leading the NC Bird Atlas in the Piedmont region. And we're looking forward to that talk, and you'll hear more about that in a moment. Before we get started, though, I would like to give you a couple of things that are coming up here with the chapter. We've always got a lot going on, so just a real quick recap. First of all, on August 19th, you don't have to be in politics to sling mud. We're going to have Mud Day at the Walnut Creek Wetland Center, and they're literally going to be throwing mud. But our exhibit, which is we're just part of this this event in Raleigh, is all around the wetlands, and we're going to have stuff about frogs and about beavers and that sort of stuff. But they also do get in the mud, so it's going to be a lot of fun. That's on the 19th. On September 7th, that is our quarterly in-person meeting. We do these once every 3 months where we actually meet in person, but we also have started webcasting them at the same time via Zoom. So it'll be a webinar and a live meeting all at once. And it's at the Bass Lake Conference Center here in Holly Springs. And it'll be featuring Jerry Reynolds, who's with the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. And he'll be talking about backyard nature. And you can see him, he's literally inside a tree, getting ready to talk to us about backyard nature. In September, and we're still nailing down the exact date, we're going to hold a native plant sale. So keep your eyes open for that one. And, you know, we got a limited supply. So when we do hold it, if you want some, make sure you get there early and watch our website to see exactly when it's going to be. But we'd love to have you get some native plants for your yard. On October 6th, we're continuing our Eco Kids program with a special program on the red wolf for the kids. And Cassia Rivera, who's a member of our chapter, has a very special activity planned around that, and also a short screening of a kid's introduction to the red wolves. And then finally, in October, we're planning a special hike all about insects. And one of our members is an entomologist. And so we're looking forward to that. We have not nailed down a specific date, but we're targeting sometime in October. So again, check out our website, check out Facebook, and you'll see all these things as they're getting scheduled. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Luke Bennett, who is the conservation coordinator for the North Carolina Wildlife Federation. And Luke will go over some of the logistics for asking questions and how we're going to handle this webinar. And then he will turn it over to John Kinsella, who's vice president of our chapter, and he will introduce our speaker tonight. So over to you, Luke.
All right. Hi, everyone. As Monty said, my name is Luke Bennett. I'm the conservation coordinator for the North Carolina Wildlife Federation. Thank you all for joining us tonight. So just to briefly cover a few logistics, if you'd like to ask a question, you are more than welcome to do so. You are encouraged to do so. You can type your questions into the chat or the Q&A, both of which are at the bottom of your screen. And please feel free to type those questions in at any point during the presentation, but we will be saving the questions for the end. We'll make sure we have some time. And that's it for me. So now I'm going to pass it over to Vice President John Kinsella, who will introduce our speaker for the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. It's my pleasure to introduce C.C. King for tonight's, what I'm sure is going to be a very interesting presentation. C.C. is the Piedmont ecoregion coordinator for the North Carolina Bird Atlas effort. She has a master's degree in geography from UNC-Chapel Hill. She also has a professional residency in environmental education at the Teton Science School in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. She also founded the Screech Owl Farm School in Chatham County. She ran that for 7 years. And in 2007, she joined the North Carolina Wildlife Commission. When she did that in 2007, she facilitated professional development and workshops and outreach. And then in 2022, she joined the Bird Atlas. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and introduce CC for, again, what I think is going to be a very interesting presentation and an update on where we stand with a lot of bird species.
And you can go ahead and share your slides now, Cece.
Thank you so much, John. How we do? Can you see my opening slide?
Yes.
Great.
Good to meet you.
Hello, everyone. Great to meet you all. Thank you for that introduction, John. And welcome to the webinar for the North Carolina Bird Atlas. We're here to give you an introduction to the Atlas, but a fairly thorough one. And we are now in our third year, but it's very important for us to meet new folks and continue to recruit participation. We have 2 more years to go in this 5-year effort. While I'm the one giving the presentation, I'm just part of a very, very large group of people that have come together to launch and follow through on this initiative. First, I want to thank the North Carolina Wildlife Federation for hosting our presentation, specifically the South Wake Conservationist chapter. The North Carolina Wildlife Federation is the latest in a long suite of strong partners that are helping us reach community scientists, and together we're working to count and conserve birds across the state. The Atlas is a project of the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission, and we're really grateful for this opportunity to speak with you all today. And we're eager to connect more deeply on this initiative. I do want to let you know that John Carpenter has joined us, and he is our Eastern land bird biologist. He initiated the North Carolina Atlas along with Scott Anderson, who's a science specialist program manager, and he'll be monitoring the chat, keeping track of those questions, and available for the Q&A session at the end. So I mentioned that we have a lot of partners. Well, there's just a tremendous amount of need for them because we have both, it's a 2-part initiative, and we have both a science committee and an outreach committee. They play really different roles. The outreach committee responds to our need to reach as many folks as possible, engaging them and enjoying bird watching in the outdoors, and ensuring that the valuable data is collected in a useful and accessible way. And I am really strongly associated with that. And the science committee is working really hard with the data because those questions will lead to, that data will help answer deeper questions in the years to come. So if you're interested in contributing or exploring how the Atlas could mutually benefit a program you're running, you could always reach out to us at coordinator@ncbirdatlas.org. So there's a short view of all those many partners. The Wildlife Resources Commission is charged by our founding legislation to maintain rich biodiversity of North Carolina. We've had a wildlife action plan in place since 2005, which is a document that helps identify high priority projects for protecting species and recreational opportunities. And it follows this basic tenet, which isn't really intuitive necessarily, keeping common species common and addressing the declining populations before they require listing as endangered or threatened saves a lot of resources of time, money, energy, all the legislative issues people run into. So we really want to keep common species common. We also serve a broad constituency, rapidly changing, but boaters, hunters, anglers, birders, and other wildlife associated activities all have a place at the table. And serving such a variety of interests can be a challenge, and we are always looking to bring new people to that. While the agency mostly focuses on the ground conservation, we also encourage participation in recreation that's wildlife associated and supporting conservation in general. As you know, we in North Carolina are blessed with this diversity of habitats, coastal beaches, wetlands, precosins to spruce fir forests. The habitat diversity means that the state hosts over 470 species of birds each year, either during the breeding season, during migration, or for overwintering. And we're charged with the conservation of all these bird species with very limited capacity. So we're forced to triage. And until recently, we had scant time or resources to monitor even a fraction of these species. The 2015 iteration of the Wildlife Action Plan identified 78 bird species with very significant knowledge gaps. So for a handful of the highest priority species like golden-winged warbler, peregrine falcon, American black duck, we have estimated the populations, the habitat associations, and their distribution in the state. The three, at a significant cost of resources and attention. So on top of this, the recent research is also suggesting that many of our lower priority species are declining at alarming rates that are largely undetected. This 2019 paper in the journal Science broadly outlined the declines in birds across the country, showing 3 billion fewer birds on the landscape since 1970 in a lot of our lifetimes. So while it's still common to hear a wood thrush calling if you're fishing in the South Toe River, this species has experienced a 56% decline in the past 50 years nationwide. And we don't know if wood thrush are declining in our state or if we have a responsibility to maintain a stronghold for this species. And that is just one example of these dozens of species that have experienced similar national declines. And we have not yet been able to track them all with just the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission alone. So to address those issues, we created the North Carolina Bird Atlas, and we have reached out to the community scientists for help, and they have stepped forward. And there's a lot more to be done still, but we'll tell you that story. So in its most fundamental sense, a bird atlas is a large-scale standardized survey that mobilizes these volunteers and biologists and hired technicians to systematically cover this vast area, usually over a period of about 5 years. And this effort's undertaken to provide measures of species diversity, of their distribution, of their occurrence, their breeding status, and their abundance. And it gives us the opportunity to document the changes in these measures once we have this baseline. So you might ask, well, there are lots of volunteer efforts in North Carolina, like the breeding bird survey and the Christmas bird count, and aren't those enough for tracking the birds? This presentation will help explain and delineate how the atlas is different from those efforts. A little bit of background here. 41 out of 48 states in the lower 48 have completed and published the results of at least one breeding bird atlas. And you can see on the map, North Carolina was the only state east of the Mississippi that had not completed an atlas of any kind before 2020. Up until 2020 is when we got started in 2021. Not all states have attempted a winter bird atlas, but our state is home to many species of greatest conservation need during that time of year. So winter data collection, it provides an opportunity to engage more non-traditional naturalists because there are just not so many birds and they're not breeding, which is very complicated. And we'll learn about that later more. But it's a great time if you're new to birding or maybe not as confident birding. You can get out there and listen for owls. You can notice the eagles and some of those early wintering species. And of course, our coast is just so blessed with an abundance of overwintering waterfowl as well. This winter data also provides an additional source of volunteer hours, and those hours help us match federal funding. They're very significant in bringing funding into the state. It provides our state match. It captures several species that begin courtship and nest here and begin their nest building here during the winter. Audubon's Survival by Degrees has also brought to our attention the impact of climate change. And looking forward, we can expect the effects of climate change to shift species ranges rather significantly. This report modeled the potential shift in bird ranges under different climate scenarios, and the data collected by the Bird Atlas will help put more information behind those modeling efforts that'll help improve future models and help us target conservation work to do the most good. So North Carolina is one of the birdiest states in the nation. But there's actually not a whole lot of eBirder density here relative to others. We're number 10 in species diversity and number 32 in observers per 1,000 people. So we're encouraging more people to come to the table and join us in going out there and enjoying and appreciating the wonder of the birds. The Atlas uses a very common app, which many of you probably already use or have heard of, called eBird. And it's very accessible and intuitive. It's the most popular platform for recording bird sightings. Contributors have collected tremendous amounts of data since it launched about 20 years ago. This data is freely available. It's downloadable by anyone. It's a very robust user base. And that's a very strong tool for us to build on as our base platform. All the data for the Atlas is submitted through eBird. It is free to use. Like I said, it's well organized. You can log in each bird sighting. You can attach photos and audio recordings, and you can record the behaviors of the birds that you see. The information can be entered over the web or your Android or an iPhone app. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how to make sure your information can be used by the Atlas as well. If you haven't heard of eBird, you can go to ebird.org and learn all about it. That's a good one. For the nuances of entering eBird checklist, we recommend taking an online eBird Essentials course. eBird also works in partnership with Merlin, which is a really great app if you're brand new to birding. It's a super tool. Merlin will go out and you can say, well, I see a little bird. It's about this size. It's about this color. It's here today. And Merlin will say, well, if it's blue and it's as big as a cardinal and it's in the Piedmont of North Carolina in August, you're probably looking at a blue jay or a few other options. It'll give you those 4 pictures. You can even play the calls and say, yep, that's my bird. So I really recommend Merlin for those of you who are just getting started. So what's an atlas? Well, as mentioned, it's a survey, a collection of data. It'll be ultimately presented in a digestible format, and the data will be used for research in the years ahead. One of the most important features, which is different, as we said in the beginning, like why not those Christmas bird counts, for example? Well, the feature here is the base structure on which it's built is based on dividing the state into 60-mile quads, and these are all standard units used for atlases. And these quads are then further divided into 10-mile square blocks. One priority block selected from that block to survey for birds. So for North Carolina, the result is approximately 900 priority blocks, I expect 927, across the entire state. So we're not surveying every single square in that grid, but we've selected one quad from within that area. We're attempting to record every species in every accessible habitat from every priority block. So the Atlas relies on the help of technicians and staff and community volunteers to visit these unsurveyed or undervisited areas to ensure that data is collected consistently. So within every block, we collect data in those 10 square mile area, and then we look at where you have been birding, where all of your observations are, and we work with you in that block so that you've gone to all the habitat types. All right. Some species might be too rare or elusive to find, regardless of the method that we're using, but the Bird Atlas is providing this framework to document the greatest number of species across the largest area in the least amount of time. So why do an atlas when eBird's already there and thousands of people are using it in North Carolina, but you already have eBird? So why are you atlasing? Why not just use those copious hours that are logged every year? Well, this map answers that question. So here it is. Here's this map of all the checklists that were submitted in 2019 before the atlas began. So you're going to notice some patterns, right? So this is a map as a geographer. I really appreciate what this is because maps can be very deceptive. This is not really as much a map of the birds as it is a map of where the birders are, right? So where do we see them? We see these sightings in the urban areas, and you can see the highways, right? All along the highways. So that is not a fair representation of the distribution of birds across our state. And that is the core reason why we need an atlas. With the atlas, the effort is distributed more evenly throughout the whole state through that priority block system I just talked about. And so here you can see the evidence of even more detection distribution based on the fact that we have technicians and volunteers visiting those blocks. You can see how the atlasers are making a significant difference, like how it's distributed. And 121,000 checklists. That's a lot of people out there counting birds. So here are recommendations for how to contribute to the atlas. And I want to emphasize that you can contribute however you wish. If you look at our logo, birds count, people count, it's really significant that we chose those words because we want you counting the birds, but we want everybody being able to count birds any way that works for them. If you're sitting on your back porch and you're watching one bird for half an hour and you see it picking up nesting material and taking it over and building a nest, that's a really significant observation. If you happen to live in a priority block, that's a really important observation for the atlas. But there are these 4 steps. You use the portal, you visit priority blocks if you're not lucky enough to live in one, and we actually need you to visit them because, as you notice from that previous map, most birders are in urban areas and they're birding where they're comfortable, their own backyards or their own neighborhoods, and those rural birds are not being counted. There are really great hotspots out there that we don't even know about because people aren't going out. They're not thinking about birding in rural areas. My recent summer technician was just telling me that as he was departing after this breeding season. He said, it just never really dawned on me to just go to some random rural county and start walking on a country road. And I was discovering birds I never expected to see out there. And there was no hotspot there. So it's pretty fun to kind of stretch your geographic limits of comfortability and expand where you want to explore. So it's a pay what you can model. And for you who have the time and the resources and the interest, you could follow all the guidelines, others might not. So to Atlas, one uses the portal, and that is a door, right? A portal, it's a door. It's a door into the data collection area. Well, how do you get there? Well, this is how you get to the door. You put that app on your phone, and this is literally what it will look like. You see those 3 dots. This is an iPhone image on the bottom right in the far left panel. That will then take you straight to settings and account. And from settings and account, you choose eBird. And from eBird, you choose North Carolina Bird Atlas. And that's it. The door is open. And until you go in and close it, it remains open. So it's kind of a one and done deal. If you leave the state, you might want to close it and then come back again. Of course, if you're an avid birder who's always, going up to Canada to look for birds. So it's very similar on the Android. And like I said, it will remain open for subsequent checklists until you change it back. You can always see and review all your checklists because you're still in eBird. That is a significant concern that people who are already in eBird have. It's like, I don't want to go over here to the portal, to the North Carolina Atlas. And it's like, you don't have to. You're still very much in eBird. You simply opened another layer or another door. So the data is then accessible to us when we're running our numbers. So the next most helpful step is to find a priority block. Choose the bird there, ideally one that needs attention. We'll tell you how to do that. So this is a clip from the Atlas effort map on our website, ncbirdatlas.org. And in this little, I've popped out the Raleigh area. You see the little red squares in the map to the left. But when you get into the Atlas, the effort map is colored, and the darker the blues and the colors, the more people have been there. And our goal is that every one of these blocks that has the black outlines, those are the priority blocks, will have a primary atlaser, a person that will ensure that the priority block meets all the requirements to be considered complete. They are the point of contact, and they are the adopter of that block, and it's advocate as well. So you'll notice that yellow block down at the bottom, that one needs some love. And that's where there are the undiscovered and unrecorded birds. So again, you'll find this map on the website, and that you'll see that there are a lot of checklists that are being completed, but not as many in priority blocks. We welcome all the data for the atlas, but entering data, priority block data, ensures that we get that systematic survey that is the unique aspect of the North Carolina Bird Atlas, so that we have representation across the state. So there's a wide diversity of priority blocks, and we're going to ask you to collect data from all habitat types as mentioned within that block. This is an example of a rural block. It has lots of public land. It has very rough terrain, very few roads. I'd call this sort of extreme atlasing. It would take a lot of work. We have block adopters and atlaser volunteers who didn't adopt a block, but they're just out there atlasing, who have written us wonderful emails saying, hey, I'm out here in Great Smoky Mountains and I've got my backpack and I'm going to do some nocturnals. I can't wait to camp out. Those are the high adventurers, and that's pretty fun. But we also have, urban blocks. So everyone of all abilities can participate. You can go where you're comfortable. In an urban block, there are lots of roads. There's lots of easy access to most kinds of habitat within the block. This one is from Southeast Greensboro. What we're emphasizing here is the importance of all types of blocks, whether it's farm fields or downtowns. We have to consider all the birds. And so some blocks are not more important than others. We've got the 3 billion birds report, and there are declines in common species going undetected in every one of these types of habitats. So again, a systematic survey is the best way to measure those population trends. This is what it's going to look like if you go on the website and you try to sign up for a priority block. You'll get to this splash window. There are 937 blocks, and many of them are not yet adopted. And those are in blue. So as you can see, there are many that are still not adopted, and they lie in these rural areas. This map could also be used, though, not just if you're going to adopt a block, but also just to get used to prepare for birding. So if you're planning to go out and visit a block, you can gather a lot of information from this map. In other words, like say you can print maps from it, bring them into the field. You can use them to navigate as well. I'm sorry, I'm jumping all over the place. You can also sign up. Okay, lost my place. Yeah, that's Moore County. Adopted by Robin Calcutt. You can ask your regional coordinator for help with getting these topos, or you can find them and print them yourselves as well if you have facility with that. But that'll ensure that you keep your observations within the block and that you sort of plan out where you're going to go. Oh, I'd love to go to Weymouth Woods. That would be a great place to go. I don't think I'm going to try to bird along that really busy highway, but I can get back into these communities, that sort of thing. Knowing that ahead of time is very helpful. You can do the street version, or you can do the topo version. Yeah. I've been mentioning these regional coordinators, and I wanted to show you how they are distributed and introduce you to their names at least. We have a vacancy in Region 5. If any of you are attending from there, we could definitely use some help. We could really use help in Region 3. Kara has the whole region on her own, and she works very hard. But all of the people that are out atlasing and the adopters themselves are part of this community making things happen. And the more we can massage those communication channels and really connect folks, I think the more excitement we build and the more we support each other. It's so helpful when one birder, emails or texts another and says, hey, I'm going to head out to Kittrell Southeast and do a nocturnal. Would you be willing to go out there with me? And then, of course, that, multiplies, and then they go to another block together. And so our regional coordinators help us with facilitating those connections, and they also work with folks to be sure that they've completed the block. So a really, really key role. I keep talking about completing a block. What does that mean? Well, completion is important because it means we have reached all across the state. Again, those red blocks all across the state, that even distribution. Is it absolutely required? No. Are we hoping for it? Yes. Why is it not required? Well, we're doing the best we can. We're hoping to get about 55 species or more in each and every one of these blocks. We're aiming for 20 hours of surveying over 5 years. A maximum of 25% that are just possible breeders recorded during and coded during the breeding season. A minimum of 25% confirmed breeders, and an average of about 50% probable. Some of you are probably dropping off at this point going, ooh, TMI, I'm not doing all this. That's okay. I'm just going to go out. I'm going to load eBird. I'm going to turn on Merlin. I'm going to record what I hear in my yard. That's good. We want that participation. This isn't just about collecting data. This is about building a community of people who are interested in conservation, who are inspired by being in the natural world, where it strengthens your sense of wonder, who find a new way to record birds than is typical for birders, right? Typically, in the stereotypical way, birders are running around, chasing down that indigo bunting at Dorothea Dix and so forth. And that's great. And that's one type of person. But there are also people who are just identify as naturalists who wander at a nearby park and notice the birds. And we're saying, you two just sit on a park bench and enjoy them, because you're going to be collecting really great information from your observations. So we're going to try to code 100% of the species in this way. And again, if this is just, again, too much information, don't worry. We have other webinars and other trainings. We have regular QA sessions where we help people really learn the details of what this means to complete a block. There's a wintering season as well. We need about 5 hours or more of that from November through February, and nocturnal visits. And I mentioned earlier that both winter and nocturnal birding is a little easier than birding during the breeding season, where there's an overwhelming number of birds for some of us. Okay. So we've talked about the portal, making sure you go through the door. We've talked about getting to the priority blocks, making sure we have distribution across the whole state. And then there's another piece, which is methodology. And as we all know in science, you have to follow a certain method. And the method we've chosen to keep this very place-based is less than a mile, less than an hour. So we don't want you sort of birding for 6 hours in an area, because birds move around. So we're trying to time limit and geographically limit where the data is coming from. If you found a really cool bird or species of greatest conservation need, it would be important for us to know when and where that bird was noticed. So giving us a 12-hour or 6-hour window or a 6-mile birding track makes it more challenging for us as we're making conservation decisions. We also ask that you start a new checklist when you get to a new habitat type. So if you walked out of the field and you walked into the woods, that's going to be very different, guild an array of species. So please do start a new checklist and submit complete checklists. And what that means is, have you tried to see all the birds you can in the time that you've been birding? It'll ask you, is your checklist complete? That's a point of confusion for a lot of people, where they're like, well, I don't know, maybe I missed one. That's not the question. The question is, were you paying attention while you were birding, or were you actually gardening and just like wrote a couple down and a whole bunch went by that you didn't bother with? That's not a complete checklist. But if you've gone out there and done your best and recorded everything you've observed, that is a complete checklist. If you're near a hotspot, please don't select the hotspot. select your actual location. We're going to try to get it again as geographically bound as possible. So we're emphasizing once again that earlier point, contribute how you wish. It's pay what you can as a model. If you have the time and the resources and the interest, you could follow all the guidelines. You don't have to, but now we're getting into sort of the nitty gritty and how it gets more challenging. This is recording the behaviors when you observe them. So while you're atlasing, you should be recording all the birds that you see and hear, and that'll help us determine the abundance and the diversity. We are also interested in knowing if these species are reproducing in North Carolina. The atlas is year-round, and so we're recording these behaviors whenever they're observed. It's optimal if you know that the bird is in its breeding season, so that you don't record that it's singing as a breeding behavior in the middle of the winter, for example, if it's not the breeding season for that bird. But this takes us to that next level of contribution, which is logging birding behaviors. And so just hang on there. If you're not, again, just relax if you want to watch this later or, learn about it later, but we'll go through it for those of you that are super engaged at this level. You can choose from 23 behaviors, and your selection is influenced by the breeding season. Again, they might just be observed. F means flyover. All of these are explained in multiple resources, tools online. The observed codes don't provide any evidence of breeding. I saw one bluebird. I added it to my checklist. I saw a turkey vulture soaring overhead. I recorded it as a flyover. There's a couple of possible codes, 10 probables, 10 confirmed. My interpretation here is, and the way I look at it, not everybody does, but the darker the color, the greater my confidence that I've got breeding evidence. A bird singing in a breeding season is possibly breeding in that area. But a bird feeding young, that has most definitely bred successfully in the area. So you can see FY is dark purple. They're a little harder to get, the darker colors, but you actually have a lot more confidence in breeding evidence if you get to those darker colors. So the breeding behavior codes, as mentioned, are broken down into 4 different categories. The possible codes are behaviors that indicate potential breeding. The probable codes indicate higher probability of breeding, and the confirmed indicate that the birds are actually breeding in that area, which is going to help with habitat and conservation efforts in the future. All of the codes and their definitions are, again, as I mentioned, found on the website ncbirdatlas.org. Here they are. That's what all those acronyms meant, or those, the letters. M, multiple singing males, territorial defense, courtship. We have Atlas 102 and other short videos. We have a Quackalaki newsletter that comes out every month, and it's also on the website with articles giving you much more information about parsing some of these behaviors. What is agitated behavior? How is that defined? Some of these articles written by our technicians who are just such skilled young people, and they've been birding since they were, some of them, 9 or 10 years old, and they do a great job explaining this and making it really accessible for folks. And here's the other set of those: physiological evidence, carrying nest materials, distraction displays. So this aspect of the Atlas offers opportunities to expand beyond that skilled avid birder archetype. You might only choose to see a handful of species, but you contribute by observing and recording behavior. And in that way, the Atlas is embracing this variety of birding sensibilities. And people count, birds count. We want more people coming. We recognize that we're not necessarily representing everyone and all the sensibilities out there, and we really value all of them. We want to know what we're missing, what we don't understand, what we haven't seen. We just completed the 3rd year of the Atlas, as I mentioned earlier. You can see here the results after the first breeding season, and already you can see the significance of the priority blocks and their role in assisting better distribution of data. But if you look at that map, again, there's the mountains, all our folks that love living in the high country. There's Charlotte, Greensboro, Raleigh, Durham, Wrightsville Beach, Wilmington area. What about the UREs? What about Person, Granville, Vance, right? Unvisited. Just like there are no birds up there? I don't think so. So by 2022, after late winter, before the heavy breeding season, we already had increased our efforts across the state. So we're really making progress within a year. And now by 2023 in March, prior to this last breeding season, it hasn't even been represented here, you can see we've significantly increased the percentage of blocks that we've covered. And we're really beginning to get some exciting preliminary results. But it's not dark blue in those areas, is it? Those blocks are yellow still. I mean, somebody's been there, but not enough. So once again, and again, and again, the call. Do you have the courage to drive out to a rural community and park at a church and wander around the graveyard and, you know, go where no birder has been before and see who you can find or what you can find? So what are we finding? Well, for example, the Swainson's warblers are expanding further north than most typical range maps show them. And although previous range maps said otherwise, we are seeing evidence of range expansions in North Carolina. These are most visible in the southern Piedmont and the Northwest Mountains. The coastal populations also appear to be expanding, but not at the same rate. Beyond North Carolina, breeding individuals have started showing up in Pennsylvania and in Ohio. So without the atlas, those might be just considered isolated incidences. But with the atlas, we can see and now provide the evidence that the core range for this species is expanding. So here, this arrow marks a spot of this confirmed breeding. So you can go into ncbirdatlas.org and into our map, the effort map, and type in your species and see their distribution in the state, which is pretty exciting. There's your arrow. I didn't have the arrow for you, right? That dark. So here's another example. According to the Birds of North Carolina, their distribution and abundance, it's a really powerful website. And I quote, "The swallow-tailed kite has tantalized North Carolina birders for years, trying to determine if the birds actually breed in the state. Kites have nested for decades as far north as the Santee River, South Carolina, and have been seen in small numbers annually near the coast in the spring." They go on to explain that in 2013, a nest was found along the Cape Fear, and a second along the Black River, and a third in 2019. Well, working together with birders across the state, we are continuing and contributing to these efforts and providing evidence now for breeding of swallow-tailed kites along the coast in North Carolina and in sparse other areas across the state. So again, just some really exciting results, and those will be continuing to flow from the data in the years following this massive effort for collection. And there's the breeding. We have the observations across the state, but there's the actual confirmed breeding. Remember those dark purple codes? Yeah. There's another one. Now, this one's a little bit different. Although eastern screech owl is said to be ubiquitous across the eastern U.S., the evidence is super uneven. So we hope the atlas is going to add some substantial evidence of breeding eastern screech owls across the state, not only in these well-birded areas. In other words, we don't really have records of where they are. We think they're everywhere, but we don't really have that because the birders aren't everywhere. So your help listening for screech owls and other nocturnal birds and undervisited priority blocks is invaluable as we're endeavoring on that objective to keep the common species common. In this slide, you can see how you can search the atlas as mentioned for a species. In this one, for example, the eastern bluebird, and then you can enjoy seeing its distribution as recorded in all of these blocks. Now, you know, the blocks are a little deceiving as well. There's a lot of other data going on, but this is the lens of the atlas, not just the lens of eBird. On our website, ncbirdatlas.org, you can find the field guide that summarizes succinctly the steps to atlasing. It gives you these basics. You can download the app, which we talked about, switch to the portal, focus on a priority block, Make sure your checklists are under an hour and under a mile, and slow down and watch the birds and record their behaviors. And that is a much richer data set for conservation and management purposes, because then we can say we've got breeding birds there. We do need to be thoughtful about how we manage and how we live well together with wildlife in this area. There's a block schedule that gives you what to look for and how to pay attention throughout the seasons of the year, because we ask for 5 visits to the block. And the website, again, on our website, you can find this field guide. It's really succinct. It's a great summary. It gives you the breeding codes. It gives you the tips. It folds up easily. You can put it in your backpack and take it out with you for the day, and have a pretty good day of field and knowing what you're doing. So, and with that, I think I have come to the end of our time and have a few minutes to spare for our Q&A session. And I'm looking forward to working together with John to answer those questions of yours. But that is the North Carolina Bird Atlas. If you have questions that didn't get answered today, you can certainly check out the website, and you can always reach out once again to that email, coordinator@ncbirdatlas.org. Thank you.
Thank you, CC. I just promoted John to panelist, so he should be coming back here in a moment.
Okay, great.
And I believe he is on. So John, you should be able to unmute yourself if there's a question that you would like to chime in on. I would like to start by just thanking you, CC. I mean, simply put, you know, we need to know where these birds are in order to conserve them, and to see this big effort that is the NC Bird Atlas. It's encouraging, and I've seen firsthand just the community that's been built around this effort too, and the excitement in people's eyes to think that they're really doing something as just a regular citizen going out and again building that community with one another, looking for birds and being a part of something bigger. So I thank you and John for being a big part of it. I did just, before, there's a couple questions in the chat here, but I did want to ask just something that popped in my head. Why hasn't there been a bird atlas done in North Carolina? Why was our state one of the last ones? Or is that hidden information that I shouldn't be asking about?
Okay, so first, I never asked that question, and I joined the Atlas in 2022. So I think John is going to have to answer that one.
Hey there. Yeah, good question. We do get that quite often, and North Carolina did attempt an atlas in the late 80s, early 1990s, when a lot of other states were conducting their first atlases, and it's a massive project. Like right now, you know, CC and I are seeing firsthand how difficult it is to manage, you know, a project like this. So imagine back in the 80s when you didn't have internet and people were sending in their data on little paper data cards and mailing them in, and people were having to enter in all the stuff by hand. And so I don't know the exact reasons of why it was not completed, but I think it was just an overwhelming amount of work. They didn't have a dedicated help and funding, and so I think a lot of those things just accumulated to the point where they just weren't able to put all the data together and finish the project. So we try to get our hands on some of the data to hopefully try and make some comparisons with what the data we're collecting now, but it may be a little difficult to do that. But we recognize the initial effort, and you know, I think can sympathize with some of the challenges that they face that we still have today.
Do you guys know if other states that have done a bird atlas, are they using the same methodology, or has it been something different?
It is a very similar methodology. In fact, we collaborate with them. We have this wonderful event that we do in the middle of breeding season called Big Atlas Weekend. And we have a multi-state and international, in fact, because Canada is involved as well. And Puerto Rico was involved, it's not international, but yeah, we have, I don't know, I think it was 5 or 6 states this year who participated. And we also touch base with them about our methods versus theirs, what they've learned. And yes, we're all using a very, very similar structure. But again, John will probably be able to add to that.
No, I agree 100%. I think we want there to be high compatibility across states so that our results are comparable, across the whole Eastern, US. And so, yeah, we're using eBird. The priority block system is very similar across most atlases. The breeding codes are also very common. And, North Carolina, we tried to step things up a little bit by incorporating a winter breeding season. States like, a little bit farther north maybe didn't see as much of a need for that, but we felt like there was an important time of the year for birds still. And so that sets us apart a little bit. But yeah, we are, communicating with other states that are actively conducting their own atlases and just trying to maintain as much compatibility as possible.
Yeah, so I did have another follow-up question there. So yeah, with that, I mean, what is the anticipated final product? And with these other atlases, is there a certain, and forgive me if you guys already said this, but is there a certain time frame? Is it 5 years, 3 years, or is it just a continuous effort as long as there's people that are willing to participate?
This baseline data on the very first atlas that we've done in North Carolina is a 5-year project, and it has a specific start and end time. And that's important. We don't just want these like strains of data just trickling in, because we want to work with that data set. When you then layer additional information from eBird over it, you can create new questions, of course, right? As any kind of method would work in a scientific research project. So that was part of your question. So it does have a distinct beginning, middle, and end. What was the other part of your question? Which pieces?
I guess just how it's some of this might not have been part of my initial question, but how exactly is it going to be used for conservation?
Oh, okay. That's a difficult question to answer because it'll be used so many ways. So researchers, master's projects, PhD projects, specific targeted efforts, if we find evidence of species of greatest conservation need that are, for example, just this coastal bird that really needs some more attention. The overall effort to redirect or hone the direction of our wildlife action plan, and where we need to pay more attention, where we have a lot of development going on, or we might, for example, say, given these riparian corridors and the biodiversity we found there with birds, we're going to recommend this, that, or the other thing. So, I mean, it's so multifaceted in conservation is how it works, right? You know that as well. But what else, John? What did I leave out?
I think you maybe asked like what a specific result might look like. And it'll be maps. An atlas is maps. So we're gonna have maps of a variety of things. It could be breeding status. So we'll have a shaded map of the probability that a species bred in an area. We'll have abundance maps, possibly for some species density maps, certain number of birds per area, occupancy, the chances that a bird actually was in an area. So, statistically, in modeling, it's just, it's skyrocketing the things that some of these people can do. So we're gonna grab onto a really talented biometrician and give them a bunch of data and say, let's learn as much as we can with these millions of records that we're collecting.
Yeah, like UCC, I really enjoyed seeing all the maps. I did some geography work in college and GIS, and it's always satisfying to see a final product of this beautiful map right in front of your eyes. I think that's a lot of work that went into that too. I think I'll dig into the chat here and just cut me off if we go over on time. Excuse it, it's just rapid fire. But so Jesse asks about what if you go to a place where there's no internet or Wi-Fi in these rural areas? And I might add on there, if you go to a place that's like private property primarily.
So let me just start with private property. No trespassing.
Right. Of course.
Definitely. You are allowed to bird on the roads. Sometimes people are even concerned, we definitely advise, don't train your binoculars at people's houses or, and do chat with folks when you're there and ask us, because we can work with you. You can download online a card you can put in your car that will identify you as a birder. And working for the Atlas, there is a magnet you can purchase online. I think it's about $20, and from a website that's through we'll link you through, and if you order them, we don't have a whole bunch of them in a warehouse. It's a pay as you go, and you can order a magnet put on your car. So when you're atlasing in rural areas, you can identify yourself. And then we ask that you put on a smile and be ready to say, yes, I'm out here birding. I'm working for this bird atlas. We're trying to figure out all the different kinds of birds in North Carolina. And then if you don't have internet, which does happen, then you keep a paper copy of what birds you've seen, and you go ahead and wait till you get back home and record them there. And that's a really good reason why you might want to print out those maps in advance. Or you can use Avenza. There are several different apps you can use that you can download a priority block. And we have a KMZ file on the website if you're facile with that tech, and you can load that into Google Maps. That's kind of my favorite thing to do, is just to use Google Maps. And then you can use those things offline. But the simplest thing might be to just go ahead and print a map, and take it with you. Yeah.
And I'll just add, I may have misunderstood the question, but eBird does work offline. You don't need internet to make it work. Some elements of it won't work as well. You won't be able to bring up the satellite imagery because you can't see block boundaries within the app, which is really helpful, but you can still collect your data and save it in the app. And then when you get home, you can use some of those other features that, to help pinpoint where your location was a little bit better. But even, most modern phones use a GPS, so you don't need internet for that either. So it usually can tell you where you were, and you can enter what you saw. And but like Cece said, sometimes it does help to have some backup paper copy maps or another app that can help you visualize and navigate through rural areas.
It looks like Carl or Carly had a similar question, saying that they had 17 acres of forest land in an internet sparse area. They carry an emergency beacon, so I can't get the coordinates while I'm out there. What do I do? Seems like you guys covered that pretty thoroughly, but I don't know if you have anything else to add for Carl there.
Yeah, again, depending on your phone, if you have a smartphone, it should be able to tell you where you are. But if you don't, then it wasn't that long ago. I would carry around just a GPS unit, like a Garmin, to help myself navigate. I still do that a lot of times.
So kind of switching gears here, are there any species that are underrepresented? When I was thinking about this earlier, I would have thought, and you guys, Cece, went into this a little bit, but I would have thought that, nocturnal birds, owls, whippoorwills might have been reported less. Are you guys finding that, or are people really grabbing hold of this opportunity to go out at night and listen for birds?
I'll go first, and I'll do my best. And John's always great at augmenting and actually listening to the real question. Sounds like, but going out at night seems to me to be a little scary for people. And so it's harder to get the nocturnal atlasing done. And that's not just true for North Carolina. We found that in multiple states. And when we talked to our partners in other states about their methodology, they said we had to relax our requirements for completing blocks because we just weren't getting those hours in. So it's difficult to get those nocturnal hours and get people to go to unfamiliar places at night. That's what came to mind when you started talking about nocturnal hours. And because of that, once again, I don't think I got everything you were asking, but I was sharing that one piece.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there are species that are underrepresented because of that, because they're only active at night. And if you guys are doing anything to mitigate that.
They for a lot of atlases, the nocturnal surveys are a challenge. And safety is one of our biggest concerns. So we don't, definitely scout an area during the day so you know what you're going to be preparing yourself for at night is I think a really good idea. Being on night is really, it's fascinating though. I mean, it's a little spooky, you see things in such a different way at night, even if you've already been there during the day. So I do recommend doing it, but be safe, maybe bring, a partner with you. We're trying to get some technicians out. We're trying to go out ourselves. It will be a challenge. There's been some discussion of trying to use ARUs or autonomous recording units where you can put something out, a little recording device, and that listens, records sounds, and then you analyze those later. But it could be, that could still be time consuming and even expensive and a bit of a challenge in its own way. So we're going to do the best we can and explore some other opportunities to try and collect data on these kind of infamously more difficult species to study.
And I think we have, Luke, we haven't had time to dig into the data. We're working so hard to collect it, but by 2026, when the atlas is finished, when we finish this massive collection effort, I think then we're going to start really seeing. We showed some preliminary results because people really want to see those. Every time we stop and start running through our numbers and looking for results, of course, we're losing time to gather data. So it's a balancing act. Yeah,
we are, I think CC said we're hiring technicians who are very skilled, but they do have to spend a lot of time just during the day getting out to places and collecting that data during the day to then ask them to, hey, come home and nap for an hour and then go back out at night and then get up at 4 a.m. to get out to do the daytime stuff. It's asking a lot of people. So, but you can hear a lot of nocturnal species, just before the sun rises or just before it sets. So, there's still some opportunities to not have to be out at 2 a.m. Hearing things and focusing on full moons is a really good way to be able to hear like night jars during certain times of the years. They become much more active then. And so, we're aware of it, and we're there are some deficiencies, and we're going to do our best to try and fill as many holes as we can.
Yeah, definitely be safe. But I've been woken up by barred owls camping in the middle of the night, and I've never been bothered by being woken up by those guys. It's a pretty special thing. I have a question that I would like to ask you guys that I've kind of run into quite a bit when I've been submitting checklists and stuff. So, because when I do go birding, I'm often with a group, and is it best for the Bird Atlas for everyone that's in the group to submit their own individual checklist, or is it best for the group to submit just one checklist?
I'll take that one. Birding with a group is fine, and sharing the checklist is a very common practice. So it can kind of depend on the individual. A lot of people, they want to see the bird, to count it for their own list. And so if they don't see something the group sees, they can go back and make some changes. And that in the data set will cause a split. So we would get sort of two different kind of checklists for that individual and maybe the rest of the group. But group checklists, it's a great way to get out and engage with people. And so it does simplify things, and we're able to handle that.
I hesitated, John, because I was not clear about the hours. I think the more people that are atlasing, the more hours we have. And so that, I think, is also a value. Is that correct?
Yeah, we were told, I think by eBird, that, if you got 10 people in a group and you go out birding for an hour, that's going to be 10 hours of effort, which would kind of inflate our effort hours, or maybe bias it up a little bit. But I've been on this summer, I was on a group trip, and that did not happen. So it could potentially get a little complicated when people start changing things individually on a group checklist. That may cause those hours to be to increase and kind of be counted more than once. But I'm pretty confident we'll be able to go into the data and make sense of that and make any adjustments that we need to. So.
And with these thousands of hours that are coming in, and you guys are saying you're going into the data, how are you ensuring that all this data is accurate?
So, admittedly, it is a lot of data to review, and we're trying to get into that a little bit more now. The great thing about eBird is that because so many people are using it, it can be a lot like self-correcting in some ways. If somebody goes out to a block and finds a Swainson warbler nearby or even at the same location, and then somebody else goes by and confirms that, or just they also see, you start to you get more confidence in the detections and the reliability of the data. Just the more people there are out observing these species. Of course, there are going to be errors, and depending on the type of error, I think we're going to have to be a little bit flexible, and I think a lot, there's going to be a lot of very reliable data that can kind of swamp out or cover up some of the maybe misidentifications that happen from time to time.
Good point.
And then the technicians that we're hiring, we're quizzing these individuals and we're interviewing them. They're sharp birders, they know their stuff. They're going to make a mistake from time to time too, but that just gives us even more confidence that the data we're collecting is of the highest quality. And I'll make one last note about, which I put this in the chat, like Merlin, the app is becoming very popular. And I think some people rely on it a little too much for the identifications it's giving you. And it is correct a lot of the times, but you still have to approach it with a little bit of caution. And if you're unfamiliar with the bird, it's best to see it and get your eyes on it. And then hopefully that will give you even more confidence that yes, that is, that was a summer tanager and not a American robin, which they have very similar sounding songs, for example.
And I use Merlin because I'm new to birding. So I put a note in the comments that I've been using Merlin. I put my eyes on the bird and I heard the bird or whatever it was, so someone just put that in the chat. Do we count hearing using Merlin or knowing what it is, or just the visual? So I that's how I do it, is through the comments.
Yeah, that's been a pretty hot topic. I mean, from what I've gathered, just try not to trust it blindly. Like that, just assume that it just knows all is probably not the right move, but it is a good tool. I do agree there. Looks like Jesse had a question that I missed here that I'll go back to. So how can kids or teenagers get involved? Maybe a 4-H project or high school volunteer hours or homeschool kids, NC State Park visitors, citizen science at libraries, Sci Starter project. Looks like she's got a lot of ideas here herself.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot of options in a lot of ways. But the first question I would ask is, how much birding does that child already do? Because some of these youth, I mean, we just in the quackalacky of this issue, we've highlighted a young teenager who's a really up and coming birder, right? He's very avid. And as I mentioned earlier, some of these technicians that John has also been talking about started birding really young. So some of these teenagers can get involved or younger than that if they're not driving, by getting out there and atlasing and following the protocols, and can make tremendous contributions. And as another example, I have a teenager who's interning with me who is not an avid birder, just learning her birds, and she's got parents who drive her. So she's going out to undervisited blocks and doing nocturnal surveys and putting in the hours and listening, and learned the voices of the owls just enough so she could do those. But as we've said over and over, this is really, pay what you can, do what you can. So a 4-H project might pick up Nest Watch, for example, and do that as a bigger initiative for themselves to achieve their 4-H objectives, but as a part of that might also go visit a priority block. And in that way, you spread the message to the home. So that and the homeschool people, I think when it becomes more family based, it can be pretty effective in getting people to a place-based connection. So if, for example, the 4-Hers family lives in Anger and the parents are willing to drive down to Bowie's Creek and do some nocturnal surveys or work with Merlin in their eyes and work in the park in the Coates Southeast block, they can do that. Running your whole 4-H group down there to try to do observations, that's a lot of logistics, right? That's pretty tough. But recycling started in the schools and went home, right? Kids learned about it in these community centers that they were in. And then they went home and then parents started recycling. So I would push for that kind of an approach, sort of distributed effort that way. As far as the state parks go, we have some state parks that do have priority blocks in them and some that just don't. And so you can bird in any block, and you can, that all contributions count and are important. But again, in order to distribute it across the state, our emphasis is still on these priority blocks. So a really fun thing to do for state parks is to go up and do hawk watch in the fall at Pilot Mountain. So I recommend that as an experience about birds, because, ultimately the data collection will be over in a couple of years. And after that, we're still hoping that we have this groundswell of people that have gone, wow, they're kind of wonderful. I want to stay involved. Yeah.
I think we have time for maybe 2 more quick questions. Does John have a question? John Kinsella?
Yeah, actually in the section where they ask you to identify a bird and what the findings have been so far, I've identified 2. The first one was wood stork, and the second one was anhinga.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So John, I think that was I think the comment in the chat was building on the part of the slideshow where I was saying you can go into the Atlas effort map and type in the name of a bird and see where the observations are that have been made, and what kind of breeding evidence has been found. As far as specifics on wood storks and anahingas, I don't have those for you. But I'd be happy to get them to you if you put your email in the chat. Maybe we can gather that evidence or that information, unless John has that on the top of his head.
So the question is where have wood stork and anhinga been seen?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, if you click on that link, and then in the sort of top left corner, or do you not have access to the internet right now?
I've got John's email. I could definitely get that information.
Yeah, I could, CC, I could send you my email.
Okay.
And then, I don't want to make this too complicated.
Well, kind of as just closing questions here. So is there anything that has surprised you with these early results coming in? Is there anything that has surprised you so far about this effort? Anything you weren't expecting?
I don't know with regards to the results. And again, I'm new to the project. The thing that's surprising me is, as a person who's really trying to do the outreach work, is that it's how challenging it is to reach all these different kinds of birders and meet their needs and connect people. Even though we have all these social media tools and ways to email and connect, I really feel like it's an on-the-ground effort, and that it is a relational effort. So what surprised me is the very challenge I threw out there. I was like, could you please connect with other birders, and could you please be an influencer for the Atlas? Because I'll tell you what surprised me. What surprised me the most was the impact of one person. I sound like John Denver, but oh my gosh, we have one Atlaser who has, and the block that I showed you with all the black blocks across the top in Raleigh, we had one atlaser who made it her purpose to complete those blocks. So she built on the work of others, but she texted other people, she called them, she emailed them and got them to go in the field with her. Her name is Lynn Erla, and she has been a tremendous advocate for the Atlas and a real inspiration for me. She's constantly keeping me updated. She shocks me with her courage. She'll write me, I'm going up to Henderson. I walked along the road. I met a really cool farmer. I'm going back next week. She's always got stories. I get tons of, I could write a book about Lynn Erla's work with the Atlas and the things she shared with me. Yeah, I would say that was the biggest surprise. Really.
And you mentioned Earl is that she the lady who's in Wake Audubon?
She is in Wake Audubon, yes.
Yeah, she gives a lot of tours. She's been doing that for years.
She atlases every day.
Very dedicated.
Volunteers continue to inspire me too. Monty, do you want to say anything? I've got just a wrap-up question, unless you just want to take it home.
No, I just wanted to say, quickly, first of all, that, my hat's off to you guys. I say you guys, but, the whole Atlas team. The magnitude of this effort it's clear to me that this is pretty major. I mean, really, really a lot of work and like you said, coordinating all those people. So congratulations on pulling it off. Seeing the maps fill in, you compared one year to the next, it was pretty impressive how much more it filled in the next year. So I'm sure by the end of the 5 years, you're going to have some pretty good data. It's interesting to me that we were talking about the value of this data. With climate change, I can't help but think that we're going to see a lot of change in what species are where, and that they may be here now, but 5 years from now, they may be heading north, right, and not coming down here. And so on. So it'll be interesting to see if they do another one. I don't know if you're going to renew this effort at another time, another 5-year period, but I suspect we'll see some pretty interesting shifts in who is where. So this is good data to collect. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. I want to thank you very much. And Luke, if you have one more question, go ahead and do it.
Yeah, this is I like this closing question. So CC, how is your position as the Atlas coordinator? How is it, I guess, transformed the way you see birds in the wild today?
So I'm in the Piedmont, and I was overwhelmed by birds, and I taught for 25 years. I did professional development for teachers, and I have to admit that when I did Flying Wild, I relied on those 25 birds that I knew. And they would get me through those 6-hour trainings, and then I would hand it off and I would say, I'm not a birder. I think what's mostly transformed for me is having heard John and Scott say over and over, everyone's a birder. And so walking outside and saying, well, I know that one, and oh, hello. And, I think I no longer can sort of walk outside and ignore them. For better or worse. Like now I'm starting, oh, hi, oh, you're here. Oh, so there's a whole new level of just sort of presence and awareness that I think prior to this project, I had kind of been numbing them out like background noises, and now can't do that anymore, getting to know who they are. So there it is, unrehearsed.
As long as you're not birding while you're driving your car, right? Yeah, I've had that mistake a couple times, but well, anyway, thank you both. And I think the North Carolina Wildlife Federation would love to get involved as much as we can as well. And we will definitely be in touch. And I want to thank everybody who joined us here tonight. This recording is going to be available in probably about a week. So we can go back into it and get all these details again. So without further ado, we are going to end the presentation. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, and I'd like to thank Cecilia and John. It was a great presentation.
Sure was.
And Cecilia, I'll send you my email address.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Great opportunity. Can't wait for some of your folks to get in touch with us and join the effort.
Go, call to action.
Yep.
That's
Thanks,
right.
everybody. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.